Hey everybody, this is Bradley Nelson, and I'm here with my co-host Tom Davies. Hello, Tom.
Hey guys.
Also, and we're here with Pharmland to talk to you about some pricing things today. Our episode today is called What the WAC, and we're going to talk about how different acronyms in the pricing, in terms of pricing and plan design, how we can talk about those so that you can understand what that landscape looks like. But first, I just want to let you know, Pharmland, as always, is here to serve up the freshest pharmacy information and insights to benefit advisors, employers, and pretty much anyone else looking to better understand this crazy industry that we live in. So we take the biggest topics, dig deep, offering perspectives you might not find anywhere else. So you definitely want to watch or listen. And as always, Pharmland is brought to you by Farm to Table, an educational program from RX Benefits. So Tom, pricing. It's your favorite topic, I hear.
If I had to rank my favorite topics within the pharmacy world, it's not the top of my list. It's definitely on my list. I think that with regards to my thoughts around pricing, it's really based on my experience, right? I don't have extensive retail experience. And so historically, pricing for me has not been an extensive topic of discussion. But I do know that there's a lot of different pricing metrics and terms that are used within the industry. And even as a pharmacist that's been in the managed care world for over 15 years, it's really difficult to reconcile those differences. And so we hear terms like AWP, WAC, ASP, AAC, MAC list. All of these play a role into the overall price that's being paid by different parties within the prescription life cycle. So I think that I'm hopeful that Bradley, I'll really lean into your experience here, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to give kind of a foundational understanding of how all these different pricing points play a role and where they actually fit within this life cycle of a prescription drug.
Well, I'm definitely happy to talk about it because I'm on one side of the counter now helping people understand why they pay what they pay as part of a plan sponsor paying a PBM and a PBM paying a pharmacy. But I was on the other side of the counter at one time. You mentioned retail experience. And when you see what you actually get paid, well, quite frankly, sometimes you wonder why in the world am I in the pharmacy business to begin with? And then you start investigating your contract terms and trying to figure out how can I maximize my revenues? Now, that's a lot different than people that are on the benefit advisor employer side. They want to pay as little as possible. But on the pharmacy side, you want to make as much as possible. So really understanding the players in terms of the how the distribution system works, the ecosystem, to me, that's what I like. So you might hear a term out there called AAC or actual acquisition cost from the wholesaler. That is usually where the pharmacy purchases and they might have a discount. But it's not necessarily the net cost the pharmacy pays. Actual acquisition cost sometimes is also known as NADAC or National Average Drug Acquisition Cost. So you might see that term being thrown around. But national average, again, as average implies, it's highly dependent on who responds to a survey that will dictate what that average drug acquisition cost is.
Which are, I feel, terms that may not be often used as much.
Yeah.
WAC and AWP, right? Those are pretty standard terms used within the marketplace. And it feels like to me, though they're used pretty commonplace, it's still somewhat of a moving target. So where does WAC play a role within this ecosystem?
All right. So let's talk a little bit about where they fit and what WAC really means. So WAC means Wholesale Acquisition Cost. This is the amount of dollars that are paid from a wholesaler or distributor to a manufacturer, and that's not inclusive of any discounts that have been provided to a wholesaler. So that's what WAC is. You might say, well, what's AWP then? That is average wholesale price. The joke is, ain't what's paid. That's definitely what it means because that's not what it's paid. So I look at this analogous to, say, an MSRP on your car. Oftentimes, unless there is some sort of economic turmoil for supply and demand, you're not going to pay the sticker price. You never pay the sticker price. So what AWP is a manufacturer's suggested retail price. So just MSRP. And it actually is calculated. It's not just an arbitrary value. It's really just 20% over wholesale acquisition cost. So WAC plus 20% or 120% of WAC, however you want to math it, you can math it the way you want. But ultimately, nobody really pays that, but it's used as a benchmark for a lot of pharmacy reimbursement at a pharmacy, but not for every drug. It's highly dependent in terms of your contract terms and what drug is considered brand or generic or single source generic. There's all these sorts of terms that we will eventually get to, not in this episode, but probably in another episode, of why someone pays what they pay, thinking that they're getting a generic price when now they're having to pay a brand copay. So we'll deal with that a little bit later. But ultimately, that's what those true terminologies are, but it has the basis in wholesale acquisition cost, WAC, and that is what the wholesaler pays the manufacturer, not inclusive of any discount.
Gotcha.
So
interesting stuff.
It is. Well, are you sure? Because I know that pricing, it's not great.
It's not top of my list, but it's still, this conversation is really helpful. So I appreciate that.
Well, the funny thing is you might hear something out there called average manufacturing price, or AMP. So that one's an interesting one in and of itself, because it's considered wholesale acquisition costs minus the discounts that are provided to the wholesaler. So it's called the average manufacturer price.
So would you say this is a far more accurate representation of a drug cost?
To a wholesaler, yes, it's a far more accurate.
Mm-hmm. Is it publicly available?
To some extent, it is. In terms of these prices actually have to be reported to the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services for manufacturers participating in the Medicaid rebate program. So that's a whole nother discussion when we start talking about a little bit later on. Maybe we can get into rebates and Medicaid and how that impacts the world of pharmacy benefits. Most people on this call might not think that Medicaid touches pharmacy benefits in a way that impacts the commercial, what we pay at the counter, but it does. It really does. So, but yeah, it is definitely a lot more reflective of what at least the wholesaler pays.
We feel we get a little bit closer to the actual cost through that.
So if you were to talk about a pyramid of just the acronyms, average wholesale price is way up here, not what you're going to pay. And then wholesale acquisition cost is going to be right here. Just below it is going to be the wholesale, the AMP. But, the pharmacy is not necessarily going to pay that. They're going to pay a little bit more. Boop. So they're going to pay a little bit more, and that's their actual acquisition cost, or potentially NADAC, what they use. And again, what the pharmacy net cost is going to be after their discounts and rebates that are one-time credits after the fact, depending on their contract, they might actually pay here. So you have this entire distribution chain that has all these puts and takes associated with all these acronyms out there, and it can be really confusing.
It can be, and I think just a level set understanding that people are in business to make money, right? Yeah. And we're not going to fault them for that. And with the variations in AMP, WAC, AWP, we have to appreciate that this allows for a particular amount of profit to be made, revenue to happen. I think that the concern we have as an industry is how large are those deltas, right? How large are those deltas in such a way that is there a perverse incentive to utilize these different pricing metrics to the benefit of the party based on where they fit within the ecosystem? And I think that's why it's really important to understand contractually how these different pricing metrics are being defined, and not only defined, but also applied.
100%. I think a lot of folks out there don't realize just what the operating margins are, net margins from a pharmacy in terms of profitability. A lot of times pharmacies, they're only making 2 to 3%. That's why you see independent pharmacies struggle and why you have pharmacy deserts whenever there's reimbursement cuts, is because they're already operating on very thin margins. And so they often have to look at other avenues to make money, whether it's diabetic education, vaccinations, things of that. Compounding, yeah, that can be an entirely different conversation too. All that stuff. So they're operating on thin margins, and these are also the chains, by the way. So the large chains of the world's, they also operate on 2 to 3% margins. Surprisingly enough, wholesalers only operate on 2.5 to 3.5% margins as well, on average. Now, there's going to be some years that it's going to look a lot different. A lot of times that happens when there's market events, we had an episode about Humira going biosimilar, and where you can procure things that are a lot cheaper, things of that nature. But ultimately, that price point for a manufacturer to a wholesaler, when you're thinking about operating margins there, it's really surprising, because what goes into the cost of a medication, it can be a lot. And I know you know this because you've talked to manufacturers directly. What do they tell you, Tom, in terms of why they price things the way they do? And I think you've had some experience and research into some of the data out there in terms of what is a fair price. And I think there's an entity out there that does that. Is that who it is? ICER?
What's that? I'm sorry.
ICER. I mean,
ICER, yes.
They're a little bit of a watchdog.
One of the watchdogs that does an independent assessment of clinical benefit and the price that should be associated with that clinical benefit, specific to drugs. So when it comes to, and this could be a separate episode as well, right? So when it comes to manufacturers and the price points associated with their medications, right? So they take into account a variety of different inputs to the ultimate price that they set their drug at once it's available within the marketplace. Uniqueness, right? Is this something that's first to market, right? First to market, is it a drug that could be considered a cure? Is it a one and done versus maintenance therapy moving forward? Is there a lot of additional competition within the marketplace that may impact where I ultimately will price the drug? Do I potentially have an advantage over other drugs within the marketplace because my administration's easier or less onerous on the patient, going from an infused product, right, that requires a clinic visit and an infusion over an hour, to an oral product that you have to take once a week? There's potential that you would have some price deltas based on some administration. What I am concerned about with regards to manufacturer pricing is it's almost like there's an attitude, we will price it based on what the market will bear. And historically, we have not had a lot of downward pressure in the marketplace. And I'm concerned that if that's the attitude moving forward, that bubble's going to burst. So you can't continue to raise prices year over year or transition from drugs that came to market 15 years ago that annually cost $12,000 now to drugs that are entering the marketplace. A majority of them are well over $175,000 annually. So that's the concern I have with regards to pharmaceutical manufacturing and the pricing associated with their medications. But to me, this is a larger discussion. I think that if we kind of take a step back to where we started this discussion, right, about WAC, the different parties within the ecosystem. So we touched off on WAC, we touched off on AWP. I think another piece with regards to pricing and the impact of pricing that we need to consider is the utilization of rebates and what that ultimately means to other players within the prescription lifecycle. I think that's a great topic for discussion after our News of the Weird. So Bradley, you have a fantastic News of the Weird story.
Well, I'm not sure if it's fantastic or not.
It is, because you have to realize that we don't have Buc-ee's here in Salt Lake City.
Oh, you don't? Man.
No.
It must be sad for you, man. I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
So, as Tom kind of alluded to, I'm a fan of Buc-ee's. I really enjoy their brisket. Who doesn't? If you don't, then there's all sorts of assortment of jerky and different coffees that Buc-ee's has. And yes, Buc-ee's, I expect a check in the mail or some sort of ACH deposit because of this commercial that you so graciously sponsored unknowingly. But anyway, interesting story about Buc-ee's coming out of South Carolina. So about 3 weeks ago today, actually, a South Carolina gentleman actually filed a lawsuit against Buc-ee's. And as we know, Buc-ee's is a ginormous gas station with an even more ginormous convenience store attached to it with everything in it. And so this gentleman was actually walking on the sidewalk outside of a store in Florence County, South Carolina. And this was a couple of years ago that he did this, but he ended up tripping over a rope that it was holding down the large inflatable beaver mascot, that everybody sees, everybody gravitates to, and every family decides they want to take a picture in front of. Unfortunately, tripping over that rope caused him to tumble, fall, and injure his shoulder. And so now there's a lawsuit, as you can imagine. Why not? Buc-ee, you could potentially get a lifetime supply of jerky out of this, right? So the lawsuit actually claims that Buc-ee's was negligent because they were aware that there was a dangerous condition with a rope that was holding the inflatable beaver in place. And right now, the gentleman is suing for unspecified financial damages. And Buc-ee's hadn't responded yet, but I'm just thinking I could get really creative, Tom, in terms of what I would ask for that might not necessarily be financial.
There's a lot of options.
There's a lot of options.
There's an assortment of jerky,
assorted jerky,
wild game, Christmas pajamas, trucker hats. You name it. Those are things that you should go after. And while I feel bad for this gentleman, to me, it's worth the risk, just the level of convenience. It's a one-stop shop.
A lifetime supply of brisket would be fairly nice.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong. I'd be there every meal of every day. I would probably need to go on Ozempic at that point. So news of the weird break, as we always do. And you know what? Hey, Tom, I know that we pick news of the weird often, but we do have a lot of audience members out there. And so I just wanted to say that if you have a news of the weird that you would like to share, or any topic for that matter that you would like for us to address, why don't you send it in? Love to see what kind of weird things are going on in your neighborhood. Nothing too weird, okay? We don't want...
It will be screened.
This is a G-rated program.
Family friendly.
We got this family friendly environment. But anyway, definitely send us what your ideas are. And hey, who knows? You may hear us break your news of weird. So, Tom, you want to transition on into talking about rebates?
Let's talk about rebates.
Are you sure you don't want to stay on news of the weird?
It was a good one, but let's transition to rebates. Okay. Yeah. So the rebate piece, right? There's a lot of attention around rebates and how they're utilized. But in the simplest sense, how do rebates impact formulary placement for PBMs?
I mean, it's a very good question. So really how it does is a rebate. Think of a rebate as a coupon. And as someone that loves to do couponing, extreme couponing, no, that's not me. That might be somebody else. But think of it as extreme couponing and a way to move your product quicker. And so you throw out all these coupons and say, I want to use this product. I want to use this product because I have a coupon. I have a coupon. Well, guess what? A PBM is not much different than a normal consumer. They want to use a coupon. But the way that coupon works is that instead of getting it off at a point of sale, because remember, a PBM does not take ownership of any product. That goes from manufacturer, wholesaler, pharmacy, patient. In this case, they get the value of the coupon back to them. Now, whoever gives them the biggest amount of coupon, that lowers the cost that they ultimately will pay the pharmacy, and ultimately how much a patient or a plan sponsor will pay as well, because that's all interrelated. They will potentially, if everything's equal, a good example, if you had Enbrel, Humira, Simponi, or all the, or Cenzia, or all those different TNF blockers out there, they have the ability to pick and choose. Well, I want to prefer this one over this one because my net cost after getting my coupon back is the lowest. So that's how rebates can influence the game. And go ahead, Tom.
And for a manufacturer, right, there's skin in the game for me, right? So I'm going to offer a rebate with the understanding I have preferred placement on a formulary, right? That preferred placement is likely going to allow me to be placed on a more affordable tier for the member, which correct. Ultimately drives my market share. So it's really balancing, right, why we're offering this, what that ultimately means to the manufacturer and the member at the counter, and access to drug at a more affordable tier. It's just how they all play a role, how tightly that interplay is wound.
And that rebate is factored into the price that is paid, the WAC. So that rebate is a portion of WAC. And I know we talked about some things that went into WAC, but rebates being a piece, but everything that a manufacturer uses to control market share is also baked into there. So advertising, right? Advertising can be something. Manufacturer copay assistance cost, all of that can be in there as well. What else can you think of, Tom, that could?
I don't know. Rock had a comment he would like to make.
Yeah, Rock did have.
He brought up rebates, and he was having no part of the rebate conversation.
No, Rock does not like rebates. Yeah. He would rather just advertise the lowest net cost, and that be done.
Yep.
Price
and there's varied opinions with regards to rebates. I think it's essential based on the marketplace as it exists today. I think that there's likely the opportunity for change moving forward, but it's just important to understand how they play a role. Why a manufacturer offers a rebate, right? Where the rebate goes. Is this going to the PBM? Is this going to the plan sponsor? Is this potentially going to the member? Those are all things to consider when we think about the utilization of rebates.
Exactly. And this is where a plan sponsor working with a PBM, this is what's important for them to know, is that negotiate. And sometimes that rebate can either go back to a plan sponsor, and that can be used to offset premiums that impacts everybody on the plan, right? Or you can choose to pass through the rebate to your patients, your members, people that are paying the copays at the point of sale. So there's always that aspect. And of course, the people that aggregate these rebates from the manufacturers, we talked about wholesalers that are kind of collecting all these medications to be a one-stop shop. The same thing happens on the rebate side. Just like you have a coupon clearinghouse that a lot of grocery stores will send off to and then get a big fat check back. Same thing happens. But instead, the PBMs, particularly the largest 3 PBMs, have their own rebate aggregators. And they will collect all the rebates from the prescriptions that flow through their systems. But here's another thing. It can also flow, you can also have smaller PBMs actually piggyback off those same big PBM entities. They might say that, hey, they might not tell you that, but sometimes smaller PBMs actually piggyback off of the bigger PBMs rebate aggregation contracts. So they take, and they can potentially get an admin fee associated with that. So they can make some money that way as well. So I know we're talking about a whole lot of different things that go into pricing, but it all adds up. And, I liken it to, some of y'all might not know about this about me, but I used to work in the steel industry. And when I worked there, we would have call centers, and you'd make this, you'd have your raw materials. They would charge something to the people that made the refined iron. Then they would send it to the people that refined the steel. And then they would send it to the people that actually made the molds. And then they would incrementally increase all these things. So whenever something's made down to the person that actually takes possession of it, all those little things adds into the cost of the product. And rebates and the distribution channel, all that goes into it. So it's
the cost of a convenience.
It's the cost of convenience. because pharmacies, if they were to go straight to a manufacturer, and
Or me to a farmer.
or you, the farmer, for the
Yep.
farmer, bring it back to the nose up to the top, right? A manufacturer is going to look at an individual pharmacy and say, well, who are you? I have to change my entire logistic shipping structure in order to accommodate you. So if you do see a manufacturer and pharmacist combination where there is a strategic alliance, I can almost bet, and Tom, I know you've done this or seen this, I'm assuming, if I had to guess, large health systems, certain specialty pharmacies, specifically those that offer rare condition treatments, you'll see that, and certain alliances to peddle certain very specific products. A good example are the recent GLP for weight loss products that are being offered through pharmacies that have a little bit of a tie into those member direct or patient direct type of initiatives. So again, and Tom, you said this earlier and it bears repeating. Again, it sounds like we bashing the manufacturer. No, not that. What they do is awesome. They treat diseases, they cure diseases. We have to keep in perspective of all these good things that they do come at a cost. And that cost has a lot of things that go into building that up.
Mm-hmm. And we all play a role within some of the dysfunction that exists in the marketplace today, right? We all play a role, right? When it comes to healthcare services, PBMs, manufacturers, pharmacies, we all play a role with regards to the dysfunction that occurs today. But I think there's onus as we look to the future is we're all going to play a role in improving upon this as well. So in no way are we calling out manufacturers that they're the wizard behind the curtain, right? We're all playing a role. We all have the opportunity to do better.
Yeah. And I know this is something you and I've kind of bandied about previously, Tom, is sometimes the manufacturers have, they have a little bit of help and a head start in terms of developing some of these products. And that's what causes speed to market type of stuff. So some of these products, they're not necessarily thought of by the manufacturer, are they?
Yeah, this to me is just another topic for another day. Is I think that we could really dive into this. If it'd be great to get some feedback from our audience that if there's a particular topic that they would like us to address in the future, we'd welcome that feedback. Any feedback on the work we're doing today, on the ways to improve, we definitely welcome that feedback. If you'd like to see more or hear more from Bradley's dog, we can work that in. But I think we've covered off on a lot today, right? So I think we did just a basic overview of pricing and how it fits within the ecosystem of the healthcare marketplace. We talked about the importance of understanding how rebates are being utilized, some of the potential risk associated with the utilization of MAC versus WAC versus AWP. I do think that we've kept it pretty high level with regards to manufacturers and PBMs and pharmacies and how those price points impact them. In our follow-up episode, as you mentioned, it's going to be a really kind of a focus on how does this impact the member picking up or the patient picking up their prescription at the pharmacy counter.
Yeah,
so I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, that was going to be a fun one, Tom. I look forward to continuing on with you. And so, but for right now, I think we might have worn out our welcome. So,
we got some news of the weird to continue to research, but please, we welcome audience feedback. Please like and subscribe. We're hopeful that you feel value in the work that's being done here, and we're always looking for ways to improve upon this and open to suggestions, like stated earlier, additional topics for discussion. But thanks again. Appreciate the insight, Bradley.
Anytime. And for now, this is Pharmland. I'm Bradley Nelson and
Tom Davies.
And we'll see you the next time.